Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan has reached out to the international community calling for debt relief for the developing world. Khan said high debt to GDP ratios create financial constraints that curb government efforts to counter the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. He said Pakistan, like much of the developing world, has to balance containing the virus with preventing people from dying of hunger. Earlier, Khan urged those celebrating Easter to do so in a safe manner by praying at home. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi called on citizens to use this day to rise together in the fight against the coronavirus. Due to the lockdown imposed in the country, worshippers were confined to their homes in an effort to curb the spread of the disease. Meanwhile, the World Bank says South Asian countries could see their worst economic growth in 4 decades due to the coronavirus outbreak. In a report, the World Bank said the region is likely to show growth of 1.8% to 2.8% this year, down from the 6.3% it projected 6 months ago. The bank also warned that almost half of South Asian countries are expected to fall into a deep recession. The bank recommended debt relief for businesses and cutting red tape on imports and exports of essential goods. South Asia has recorded more than 13,000 cases so far, still lower than many parts of the world. But measures taken to counter the coronavirus have disrupted supply chains in the region, which have 1.8 billion people. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been discharged from hospital after receiving treatment for COVID-19. He continues his recovery from the disease and will not be returning to work immediately. Meanwhile, the UK's coronavirus death toll has risen to 10,612 with 737 new deaths reported in the last 24 hours. The global number of infections has topped 1.7 million with over 100,000 deaths. In Spain, the daily COVID-19 death toll has risen by 619 from nearly 3-week low of 510 yesterday, bringing the toll to almost 17,000. The Netherlands has reported 1,188 new infections over the past 24 hours, taking the total to 25,587, while the number of deaths rose by 94 to 2,737. Iran's death toll increased by 117 to 4,474, with 71,686 total recorded cases. Russia has reported 2,186 new cases, which is the largest daily increase since the start of the outbreak. This brings the national tally of confirmed cases in Russia to 15,770. China's National Health Commission reported 99 new cases on the mainland, including 97 involving overseas travelers. Mainland China's tally of infections now stands at 82,052, while the death toll stands at 3,339. In Pakistan, the fatality rate of coronavirus has increased to 1.7%, while the global fatality rate stands at over 6%. In a briefing, State Health Minister Dr. Zafar Mirza said over 17,000 people have registered in quarantine centers across Pakistan, and out of them, 18% have tested positive. He said half of the cases in Pakistan are of local transmission. Mirza said coronavirus is a preventable problem and could be curbed by taking proper measures. At least 88 people have so far died of the coronavirus pandemic in Pakistan. The country has 5,182 confirmed cases so far, with 88 deaths and over 1,000 recoveries. Pakistan says India has once again violated ceasefire along the line of control and working boundary, wounding 2 civilians. Military's media wing said Indian troops started unprovoked firing in the Chirikot and Shakargarh sectors along the border. Inter-Services Public Relations said Indian forces deliberately targeted civilian populations during firing. The wing said 57-year-old citizens resident of Nangal village along the working boundaries sustained critical injuries. It said both wounded have been evacuated and being provided with medical care in the hospitals. Yesterday, 6 civilians along the LOC were wounded due to unprovoked Indian firing. As the world tackles the coronavirus pandemic, India continues its state terrorism in occupied Kashmir with the arrest of 50 civilians in the Sopore area of the Baramulla district. Police conducted their raids particularly against the youth on the pretext of anti-virus drive. Speaking to media, their relatives said the coronavirus has become a new tool for the occupational forces to persecute Kashmiris. Freedom Movement leader Shabir Ahmad Dar condemned the arrests and raids by the Indian forces. He said even criminals are being freed from jails around the world because of coronavirus, but the Indian authorities are arresting more and more youth. Meanwhile, over 250-day military lockdown in occupied Kashmir has badly hit the Kashmiri people psychologically. In another news, the United States has lauded the Taliban stance and steps against the spread of coronavirus in Afghanistan. U.S. Envoy for South Asia Alice Wells says Washington joins Kabul in praising fighters' efforts in raising awareness. In a statement, Wells commended the Taliban's offer of a safe passage to staff working to prevent the spread of the virus. The Taliban have launched anti-COVID-19 drives in their controlled areas, including Laghman and Helmand provinces. The group has established awareness and quarantine centers in these areas to tackle the deadly virus. Afghanistan has reported 18 deaths and around 550 coronavirus infections across the country so far. The Taliban say they will release 20 prisoners of Afghan government today. Spokesperson Sohail Shaheen says the released inmates will be handed over to the Red Cross in Kandahar province. Earlier today, Kabul said it freed another 100 Taliban prisoners under the Doha peace deal. The National Security Council says President Ashraf Ghani ordered the release as part of efforts to bring peace in the country. The Kabul administration has released 300 Taliban prisoners so far. Yemen-Saudi-backed coalition says it has killed 38 Houthi rebels during fresh clashes. Fighting in the war-torn country rages on as both sides accuse each other of violating the ceasefire agreed earlier this week. The Yemeni army said it retaliated to multiple attacks by the Houthis in the Sada province. But a Houthi spokesperson accused the coalition of launching 25 raids in the last 12 hours. He said the aggression will have serious repercussions and will lead to escalation. The Yemeni government forces also claimed recapturing of a military camp in the strategic Socotra island. The camp was previously under the control of the Southern Transitional Council separatists. In Israel, President Reuven Rivlin has turned down a request from Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz for a 2-week extension to form a new coalition government. In a statement, Rivlin said the extension would not be possible under the current circumstances. This means Gantz and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have a midnight deadline on Monday to reach a power-sharing deal. If they fail, the country could be forced into a 4th consecutive election in just over a year. The Blue and White Party chief has mandated to form a government in 28 days after winning elections on 2nd March by a narrow margin. Earlier, Gantz said two sides are close to signing an agreement, and with additional time, an understanding can be finalized. Netanyahu has also called for an immediate resumption of talks in an atmosphere of goodwill. Iran says Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has held talks with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres over US sanctions and Yemen crisis. In a telephone conversation, two leaders discussed the impact of sanctions on Tehran's fight against coronavirus. Iran state media says both leaders condemned Washington-imposed curbs on Iran during the pandemic. He said both also discussed ongoing conflict in Yemen and chances of ceasefire amid virus spread. Zarif and Guterres conversed about the plight of Yemeni people due to war and conflict. Iran has recorded 4,357 deaths and over 70,000 countrywide coronavirus infections so far. In Congo, 2 soldiers and 33 militants have been killed during clashes in the Gold-rich northeastern province of Ituri. A military spokesman said the government troops fought Codeco militia in the towns of Diaro, Dala, Lipri, and Sheibi in Djougou. He said the fighting erupted between the militia tried to invade the towns. The military said it seized several weapons from the militants, including 5 AK-47 weapons and 2 PKM. In January, over 200 Cogeco militants surrendered to the government forces after a crackdown in the country's volatile east. DR Congo has recorded a second Ebola death in days after over 7 weeks without a new case. Speaking in Beni City, WHO's local official said the latest victim of the deadly virus is an 11-month-old girl. The official said the previous case was of a young electrician. Congo had been due to mark an end to the second deadliest outbreak of the virus on record until a new case was confirmed in Beni. The outbreak has killed more than 2,000 people since August 2018 in Congo, where militia violence has hindered efforts to contain it. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Ukraine, wildfires have reignited in Chernobyl's radioactive forest as radiation readings near the wildfires have been elevated. The fire started on April 3rd in the western part of the exclusion zone and spread to nearby forests. The fires erupted near Chernobyl nuclear power station, which exploded in April 1986, causing world's worst nuclear accident. The Ukrainian ecology inspection body said radiation in the epicenter of the fire exceeds the norm. The Exclusion Zone Management Agency said fires have burned over 8,500 acres over the past week. The Ukrainian Ministry of Emergencies has deployed 400 firefighters and 100 fire engines to the region, including helicopters and airplanes. In India, more than 100 journalists have condemned government's efforts to curb media's freedom of expression and reporting. Uttar Pradesh government has filed an FIR against Siddharth Varajan for writing against Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. In a statement, journalists said this FIR constitutes nothing but a brazen attempt to muzzle media in the country. They said Varadarajan only reported about Yogi's activities after government imposed nationwide lockdown. The journalists said despite complete shutdown, police have ordered the journalists to appear in the UP from Delhi. India's decision to extend the COVID-19 lockdown by 2 weeks has worsened the uncertainty among millions of migrant workers. Ill-planned and abruptly imposed curfew has forced thousands of workers to reside in schools turned into shelters. The officials said they have not received orders from government about proper arrangement and future of these workers. Meanwhile, continuing the hatred, Assam officials have asked not to use relief funds for Muslims. Despite stepped-up measures in the fight against coronavirus, 4 countries in the Southeast Asia have witnessed a surge in cases.
In Malaysia, the total number of cases stands at 4,530, while 73 people have died so far with almost 2,000 recoveries. Indonesia's number of cases rose by 330, bringing the total to 3,842, with the death toll at 327. After the capital Jakarta, the government imposed comprehensive social restrictions in the cities of Bogor, Depok and Bekasi. In the Philippines, there were 233 new cases, bringing the total to 4,428. So far, 247 people have died in the country from the virus. On Friday, Manila banned healthcare workers from entering and leaving the country during the COVID-19 crisis. In Thailand, 45 new cases were recorded, bringing the total to 2,518. A total of 35 people have died from the virus and 1,135 have recovered.
Health authorities in Middle Eastern countries have reported new cases of the novel coronavirus. Since appearing in China last December, the virus has spread to at least 185 countries and regions. More in this report.
Kuwait has confirmed 80 new COVID-19 cases, raising the total to 1,234. Lebanon has reported 11 new cases, increasing the total to 630. Oman registered 53 new cases, taking the total to 599 people with COVID-19. The Saudi Health Ministry says some 1,639 repatriated nationals have been tested so far and placed in mandatory isolation. The kingdom has registered more than 4,000 cases so far. Countries across the Middle East have been repatriating their stranded citizens abroad and carrying out thousands of daily medical examinations.
Italy has supplied German rescue ship Ellen Kurdi with food supplies after Berlin called on EU for assistance. Rescue organization CI said enough food was supplied to last for up to 3 days as the ship is still searching for a safe haven. Italy and Malta have refused to allow the ship to access their ports, citing concerns over coronavirus. On Friday, Germany said the government was examining alternative locations for the ship could dock. Christians are celebrating Easter Sunday under coronavirus lockdown in many countries, with empty churches and the Pope on a live stream. At the climax of Holy Week for planet's 2 billion plus Christians, congregations were held at homes to avoid spreading pandemic. This report will now tell you more.
Around the world, Catholics followed the papal service or masses said by priests in their own empty churches or on the internet. On Easter Eve Mass in an empty St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis urged people to not yield to fear and be messengers of life in a time of death. The vigil, which normally takes place in a church packed with about 10,000 people, was attended by only about 2 dozen.
How beautiful it is to be Christians who offer consolation, who bear the burdens of others and who offer encouragement, messengers of life in a time of death, in every Galilee, in every area of the human family to which we all belong and which is part of us. For we are all brothers and sisters. May we bring the song of life.
In a first Easter speech, UK's Queen Elizabeth said Easter isn't cancelled, as coronavirus will be defeated with resilience. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, in a rare Easter address, praised the citizens, asking them to continue social distancing in the wake of the pandemic. Steinmeier encouraged strength and solidarity in his speech, as the German government had asked people not to travel during the Easter break.
Good evening, fellow citizens. In a few hours, Easter celebrations begin. Outside, nature is blooming. We go outside and to see each other, loving people, family and friends. Or so we were used to. That was a part of it. But this year, everything is different. It hurts to go without visiting parents. It breaks grandparents' hearts to not be able to hug grandchildren on Easter at the least.
The coronavirus capsizing Easter traditions, Christians are attending church services virtually, setting up camps in backyards.
In his Easter message, Pope Francis has called for debt reduction for poor nations so the world can better fight the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Pope's Easter message, delivered from an empty St. Peter's Basilica, was by far his most pressing and political since his election in 2013. He said it is time to end indifference, self-centeredness, division and forgetfulness, as the whole world is suffering and needs to be united. The pontiff said politicians and governments must avoid self-centeredness and help each other's populations. Pope Francis also repeated his call for a ceasefire in all corners of the world and said the pandemic should spur leaders to finally end long-running wars. We're taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news from around the world. For our top business story, we look at the oil markets as U.S. Republican senators have urged Saudi Arabia to take concrete action to cut crude oil output. Senators raised the issue during a conference call with Saudi Energy Minister Prince, Deputy Defense Minister and Saudi Ambassador to the U.S. The call was led by Senators Dan Sullivan, who introduced legislation in March to remove U.S. troops to raise pressure on the kingdom. The legislation also seeks to remove Patriot missiles and THAAD defense systems from Saudi Arabia unless the output is reduced. Sullivan said Kingdom needs to take sustainable concrete actions to significantly cut oil production, and it needs to do so soon. Oil prices had fallen to 18-year low as COVID-19 outbreak lockdown hampered the demand and followed by oil price war in a race for market share. Turkey says volatility in oil prices must end immediately. Energy and Natural Resources Minister Fatih Domnez said price stability is crucial for predictability in the global oil market. Domnez said there should be cooperation between the countries in the supply and demand sides of the oil market. He added, while there was a supply and demand balance of 100 million barrels per day before COVID-19, now there is a decline of 20 million barrels per day. Domnez said this is due to the stalled global transportation industry, since 2/3 of crude output is used in transportation. He hoped energy markets return to their competitive nature under normal conditions soon. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.